Hello folks, welcome back to the channel. Thank you very much for joining me. You are always most welcome. Well, today, something very different, as you'll have already noticed. It's World War I and we're under an artillery barrage. I think it's stopped. Oh, white gloves. Oh. No, I'm not turning into Michael Jackson. There's a very good reason for them. Just bear with me a moment, because I have got to make sure that we've got some proper lighting for you. And as the barrage appears to be over, I'm going to put the lights back on. There we go. Now then. Something completely different today. We're going to have quite a serious conversation today, despite perhaps appearances. If you would bear with me though for just one moment, I just have to get my equipment all ready, and I want to show you in the fullest time. I'm going to show you some photos. I'm going to show you lots of interesting stuff, to be honest. Anybody that's got an interest in the First World War is going to find this remarkable. I was sitting thinking, why didn't I tell this story before? But of course, really, simple reason is, you know, my other channel, we're on Peter Goes Rogue today, and the other one is really a modelling channel, and it would have been going right off the subject matter, really. But now I've got carte blanche and I can talk about important things that are of a historic nature and something obviously very personal to me, but I think it will ring a bit of a a chord with a lot of other people, especially those of you who've got, you know, grandfathers or great-grandfathers who fought in the First World War. So why don't we get straight into it? So what I'm going to do, I think there might be 2 or 3 videos, but this is going to be the sort of an intro video. It sets the scene. And I've got quite a remarkable story to tell, so I'm just going to move my computer out of the way here for a second, and I'm going to first of all give you the sort of short version which sets the scene really, without going into the detail, which I'll do later. Going back to the Christmas of 2013 was not a good time for me or my wife. Basically I lost my uncle a couple of weeks, 3 weeks beforehand, at the end of November, and we had his funeral on, I think it was the 20th of December, and I was very upset about this, as was the whole family. He became ill and died relatively suddenly. Went into hospital having a little bit of an issue, and suddenly, yeah, anyway, we won't go into the details, but very sad, and a really well loved uncle. And the very next day after his funeral we lost our cat, which again I won't go into all the details about, but it was just a double whammy for me personally, and for my wife, and it was really hard. And so I was talking to one of our neighbours who ran the local website, and he was very interested in history himself. And he said to me, I think he was trying to cheer me up really, a gentleman called Bob Cartwright, who sadly is no longer with us either. Anyway, he basically said, listen, why don't you write that story you told me about your grandfather in World War I? Give you something to do, take your mind off your uncle and your cat, sadly, and it'd be something positive, a nice story at Christmas. And I said, oh, okay, I thought that, let's do it. Now, the gentleman concerned, you're probably all looking already, is this gentleman here behind us. George Dickinson was his name, born in 1894, if I'm not mistaken, and lived in the sort of Reddish area, Stockport, near Manchester. But let me give you the short version, because I'm going to go into, say, 2 to 3 videos about this, which I hope might inspire 1 or 2 of you to look up perhaps a bit more of your own family history if you don't know it anyway. As I say, I've got these Michael Jackson white gloves on today instead of black gloves. Not trying to be different, there's a very good reason now, which will become obvious. But first, let me read you this story. This is the short version, okay? Now, I wrote this story. I actually then went on the following year and wrote a play. I wrote the play, no, sorry, I get that wrong. I wrote the play some years earlier, in fact. I wrote the play in 2009. Which is based on true events. It's not supposed to be accurate. It patches together a bit like a movie in some respect. Patches together lots of different events, true events, into a fictional story. But we'll get to that in a different episode. Let me just read you the story, and we'll take it from the top. So basically, it's titled "An Uplifting This is the sort of thing that was put on the local website. An uplifting tale of heroism for Christmas. I lost my uncle recently, a few weeks ago, to a sudden illness, and I attended the funeral the Friday before Christmas. My wife and I were comforting my auntie, who you'll hear more about later, and was reminded by her how previously she'd given me a very important keepsake 10 years earlier. This was a 1916 World War I Gypsy, which is a brand, waistcoat pocket diary that belonged to my grandfather, the good Mr. Dickinson here, and it basically contained amazing details of his experiences and part of a truly remarkable story of the day that my family history was truly written. Very epoch-making day, as will become clear. I thought that, given we are soon to mark, this is dates it slightly, we were soon to mark the 100th anniversary of the Great War, and I'll come back to that in a second, because we actually not only do we mark it, events were put in place that this story gathers its own momentum, but I'll explain that later. So this was written in Christmas 2013. So we're going to next year we'll be having the 100th anniversary of the Great War in 2014, and the readers of the website might find this very interesting and uplifting story for Christmas. Please note that this story has been made into play and copyright is this. No part may be copied, reused for commercial gain or any other purposes. You've been warned. Anyway, here we go. The play itself was called 11th Hour, written by me. Now, I'm not a playwright and I don't have any history of writing plays, so it's not a David Mamet play or anything like that. But it's based on a lot of real events and it does bring together some interesting facts. So let's have a talk about it. So, Salvation at the 11th Hour is the title of the chapter, and it says, in 1914, my grandfather, George Dickinson, from Stockport, was encouraged, like so many others, to sign up and serve his king and country in the Great War that engulfed continental Europe, and he then joined the Cheshire Regiment, the 6th Battalion. Something we will talk about again later. I have a book all about it right here. Not just any book. I'm interjecting just to try and make this interesting visually for you. Not just any book. This is a gentleman called John Hartley, who ends up reading these accounts and realises that I've got lots of interesting information. And to prove the point, there is the photograph of my very own grandfather on the back of his book. Okay, so now you know that this is only as a result of my cooperating with him on his book that he was already writing, and I gave him some more material via this diary. And this diary is the epicentre, the pivot point of this entire story. That's why I'm wearing the gloves. We'll come to that in a minute. So, this diary, combined with anecdotal evidence told to my mum and my auntie and passed down through the generations, told a tale of constant training and manoeuvres and marching and more marching. Indeed, it seems that they marched all over the northeast of France and Belgium, back and forth, especially in the north area east of the Somme battlefield. A very positive effect of moving around like this meant that my granddad and his mates were effectively kept in reserve and didn't have to sit in a frontline trench with the terrible mortal risks that we all know about today. Food. Food problems were a daily issue. Finding enough food to supplement the basic and very insufficient army rations, barely enough to feed a child, and keep clean and free of lice in one's irritatingly itchy army combat uniforms was a constant struggle. The hunt for food resulted in the regular summary slaughter of farm animals, many of which were roaming in the countryside in fields and forests, having been liberated by the shelling or the abandonment of farms. One day, for example, my granddad and his comrades found a wandering pig near a forest, and they killed it for the pork meat, which kept them fed for a number of days. George was also briefly sent to the ruined village of Neuve-Chapelle, where the brave Australians, supported by other gallant soldiers from India and Portugal, later fought a terrible battle with the Germans. This is a mere 1 mile away from the Orbers Ridge near the village of Fromelles. A certain Adolf. In this location of the front line, a certain Corporal Adolf Hitler was serving at the same time in 1916 with the Bavarian Observer Corps in a bunker still visible today, right beside the D141, as is seen in this photograph. I'll show you the photos in a minute. This is very poor reproduction, so. Now I'm just going to interject here and say that Hitler was in fact there for over a year, and he was a runner and a message sender and he actually used to shuttle between 2 bunkers, the one that I show the photograph of, and there's one that I can't show a photograph, which we couldn't really get access to because it's right across some fields with no footway access to it, or it's across farmers' land. I'd probably get shot by the local French farmer if I'm trying to get there. But that was actually a bigger bunker, and he used to shuttle between the 2. But anyway, I'll show you the pictures in due course. And it says, Hitler would go back every night to the nearby village of Fawn-on-Weps, where he was billeted in a cosy house. If only the significance had been known about at the time. Hitler was this cosy house, by the way. He's now above a little chemist shop. Anyway. Who knows, my grandfather might have actually changed the course of world history with a lucky pot shot in the right direction. Sadly, though, it wasn't to be, and his marching tour went on. So Hitler was there for over a year, but my grandfather wasn't. He was only there for days, I think, or maybe a week. Soon, however, so... you know, I mean, that is not invented, I promise you. This is true when I'm telling you, absolute truth, as documented. You see it in the diary. But it shows you, you know, the number of people whose great-grandfathers or grandfathers are in this situation, probably, where they may have even seen Hitler in the distance, you know, and you think about how history could be changed so easily by any one of them. There was a tale about a sniper, I'm interjecting in my own story now, but there was a tale about a sniper who actually tried to shoot Hitler when he was running from between delivering these messages in the trenches. And of course he was hit by shrapnel, he was hit by gas. We'll come to that later. Soon, for my grandfather, the training suddenly stopped and the squad were sent to be positioned in the trenches at Vimy Ridge, which is on the hill top, close to the village of Givenchy, as in the perfume, just north of the town of Arras. Life in the trenches was very tough indeed. Mud, rats and dysentery were common problems for all the soldiers on both sides on the front line. It's typical for the Germans to launch an artillery bombardment in the evenings, which would shatter the nerves and resolve of even the toughest man. British howitzer shells brought equal terror to the German front line in a very similar fashion. I think ours were actually bigger calibre at the time as well, so it wasn't easy on either side. My grandfather's diary relates the witness he bore to some amazing sights on the front line, like the Royal Flying Corps, who apparently had air superiority over the trenches in this sector. Probably because it's further north and they've probably got more support there. There was a fighter race known as Mayen, the Mad Major, who George described as the most daring pilot he'd ever seen, climbing up and then diving his biplane down, probably a start with camel actually, guessing, diving his biplane down on the German trenches and then strafing the cowering soldiers with machine gun fire and even small bombs. Finally, his luck runs out. On the night of the evening of the 16th of June 1916, George's luck finally ran out, and he and his fellow Stockport friends were told by an officer that they would be going over the top to launch a reconnaissance raid on the German trench positions at night. The men waited nervously until a silent hand signal was given, and then they climbed up the wooden ladders and quietly stepped clear of their parapet. They had gone toward the German They had gone towards the middle of no man's land when a flare lit up the sky from the German side and machine gun fire began, seemingly in every direction. George dived into a shell crater to find some cover and was separated from his mates. Then things got even worse as the German mortars opened fire and one shell hit my grandfather, seriously wounding him in the right leg. He was actually hit in the right leg and it went straight through his leg into his left leg. So he actually got hit in both legs. But his right leg was bad. He was now bleeding badly and could hear German voices as their soldiers had now left the trenches to mop up and kill the British stragglers. George became unconscious for a short while, but when he came to, the machine gun fire seemed to have stopped and the battlefield was quiet again, but heavy with smoke from all the shelling. He suddenly saw a figure out of the smog and tried to get to his feet, but it was impossible due to his now very weak state. Imagine his horror as instead of seeing a khaki-clad Tommy, the man was in fact a grey tunic-clad Hun, offering him only a rifle and a bayonet as this German soldier approached him. One can only imagine how one's heart would sink at such a moment. But to George's sudden complete amazement, instead of having the bayonet plunged into his shaking body, the soldier instead looked around to check if any of his fellow Germans were around. But there were none. So he threw his rifle down and hoisted my injured grandfather onto his shoulders to give him a piggyback ride. The German soldier then said, "Wo ist die Hospital, Tommy?" Where is the hospital? George gestured it was down the hill, south of the battlefield next to the Bethune Road. Upon which the German quickly ran sideways through the fog of no man's land and away from the front line, crossed a small stream, and eventually crossed the British front line unseen, to soon find the field hospital with its Red Cross tents and slip into one unobserved. You literally couldn't make this up, could you? He then popped my granddad down onto a table shouting, "Tommy crank, Tommy crank." Tommy hurt. Until a medical orderly appeared in wide-eyed amazement, followed by a guard who drew his revolver. George, my grandfather, shouted, "No, he's just saved my life, please treat him well." The German was then given some tea and cake prior to being marched off to the prisoner of war camp and possibly later transferred to a POW camp, possibly in Cumbria or the Isle of Man, we're not sure. But not before the two men were allowed to exchange their personal address details. George thanked the gallant German, who was actually called Private Glandorf, who had clearly had quite enough of the horrors of the war, and in a far-reaching split-second decision decided to take matters into his own hands. In such epoch-making moments, history turns. The nice thing about the story is the two men stayed in touch and remained pen pals, exchanging Christmas cards, and even met up for a comrades reunion, so I believe, in Bergen in Norway in the mid-1920s. Prior to both getting married, must have had a lad's weekend away. George's leg wound troubled him for the rest of his life, but he never really complained about it, grateful just to have survived the war when so many of his comrades did not. George stayed in touch with Landorf, who we think lived near Munich, for years, but sadly stopped receiving letters from him in the very late 1930s. One can only guess why this would be. Maybe he was Jewish and had maybe fled Germany, or maybe just the Nazi regime persecuted him for some reason. We will never know. One thing is for sure, had he not bravely acted as he did, my granddad would surely have died. My mum and her sister Margaret would never have been born, and I would not be here to relate this story to you today. At Christmas it's good to remember that good men and women do not always get to choose where they come from or which side they are on. And from that, the very darkest of moments in a dark abyss can sometimes shine forth the brightest light of humanity. Merry Christmas, everybody. That is a true account, as was told to me by my mum and my dad, because my grandfather discussed it with both of them. Now I'm going to tell you a little bit more about. I became particularly interested in this when my parents died in 2008. I've got here all sorts of memorabilia, but I'm going to show you the diary because this is just dynamite, frankly. And it was so what you've just heard read out to you word for word was then picked up upon. It went on the internet and it was picked up by a lady called Joanne, who worked for the Stockport local council in the museums department, and was fascinated and said, and she got in touch with me via the website and said, "Do you still have this diary?" And I said, "Yes, I do. Yes, I do." And basically she was preparing for the autumn of 2014, and we were going to have a proper centenary commemoration exhibition at the Stockport Museum. She's just next to the market in Stockport. And that she was desperately wanting to know if I would collaborate with her and show this diary. And it could actually be in the exhibition. So, long story short, A, yes, I agreed to do that without reservation. B, I immediately got my auntie, Margaret, involved. And we went down to Stockport in the spring of 2014, about April, May I think it was. And they recorded a video, just under an hour, of the two of us talking about the diary itself. I'd had some help from my sister, also called Margaret. Margaret had basically, she'd seen the diary as well, and she'd actually transcripted it, which I'll show you shortly. And I have the actual diary right here, which is why I'm wearing the gloves. So my sister transcripted it, which enabled me to get to grips. There was some issues with the transcripting, not mistakes by her, but it was quite hard to read somebody's handwriting. And some of the spellings he got a little bit incorrect, which any of us would do, because they're French town and village names, very easy to make a mistake. Plus these names change over time as well, so it makes it quite tricky to trace back. But what I did is I got a map, which I've also got in front of me, and I plotted on the map all the things that were in this diary. Now the sad part is, A, it's only 1916, and B, it's only 6 months, because he gets knocked out of the war on 18th, I think it is, of June. So we've got 6 months, basically. But it's fascinating to see all these places that they marched around to, all on foot, most of it was on foot. And just to see the scale of the battlefield, and to read the physical experiences of somebody's daily diary that's under that kind of very, very difficult circumstances, incredible stress, fear, not being able to get a proper wash or a bath, not being able to have clean clothes, it's just unbelievable, really. Anyway, we'll get into that later. So, this we go for this interview, if you like. It's not really an interview, it's more of a presentation where, so my auntie sat and read out a statement she'd written. She'd had a few months to think about it, which I'll show you. And she reads out this statement about her father, and she really focuses on her daddy, and how it affected him, his life, and what that meant to her, and how much she knew about it, and the impact it had on the family, which is very interesting indeed. And I just go into the details of the chronological story about the diary and the war, and what we know and what we don't know. And what we didn't know, and I haven't been very successful because there just isn't enough data, I'm afraid, is trying to trace this man who saved his life and saved my family and all of us in my family, who would not be here now if he hadn't. If he'd have just put the bayonet into George, that was the end of it, and I would never have existed, and nor would any of my family. Quite incredible when you think about the consequences of things, It's scary, really. Anyway, without further ado, I'm going to talk about, I'm not going to read the excerpts from this, because there are lots of quotes. And this is a gentleman who saw the exhibition. John Hartley contacted me again. I've just seen this exhibition in Stockport. I've been given permission to contact you. Would you please help me, because I'm writing the book about the 6th Battalion, the Cheshire Regiment, and that's why we have the same photograph on the back of his book, because there's several quotes, and there's some of the photos are in here where it says, I get credit, but I'm just the guy who told the story really, and put it in the exhibition in the museum really. So I'm just flicking through and trying to find. There's a very obvious picture of him in here somewhere. I'll maybe share this another day though, because I think there's some interesting quotes in here, which not just from my grandfather's experience, but others too. Remarkable. But isn't that wonderful? It's, you know, it's forever now in history, well beyond anything I do. It's now in a book, and the photograph of him is there forever. It's fantastic. So I'm really pleased about that. The first thing I did was get the very first copy of this and send it straight to my auntie, and she was still alive. Sadly, she's passed away now 2 years ago. April of 2023, we lost her, which was very sad. Last of her generation. But she got great pleasure from reading this book, and the fact that her dad was on the back of it. It must have been, I know she was absolutely thrilled to bits. And she was so thrilled, she gave me lots of memorabilia of other things that I've got round me. But anyway, let's see the diary. It's going to be a little bit tricky to... I will have a go at zooming you in, but I won't do it for every page that I show you, because it's just quite hard to read, I suppose. Shouldn't go and get that flame anywhere near the tissue paper. There, here it is. I'll show you this. So this is the genuine article. This is now 109 years old. Almost 110 years old. Here we go. So this is his waistcoat, Gypsy Waistcoat Diary, 1916. I'm hoping the camera's going to pick up the details. It's quite hard to see. Yeah, I think it is. How's that? And there we go. And it's from Hargreaves, Hull and London. Sorry, the company's in Hull and London. Hargreaves are the manufacturers. That is truly remarkable. Bit of history there. And when we open it up, it's so, I mean, it's tiny, isn't it? It's a tiny little thing, and yet it's got lots of data in it. It's got how much it costs you to post the postal charges. It's got weights and measures, Greenwich Mean Time, calendar for 1915 to 1919. Calendar notes for 4 years. It's incredible. Weights and measures, things you need to know, newspapers, things you need to know. Switzerland, how much it costs to post a letter to Switzerland or the USA. Absolutely remarkable stuff, really. I mean, it's just a mine of information, it really is. Moon phases for 1916. Absolutely amazing. Actually got a page that's a little bit bent there. If we can unbend that without doing any damage. I think we'll do that later. Useful legal memorandum. Bankruptcy. What's involved in bankruptcy? Anyway, enough of all the generic stuff. Shilling egg table. Some amazing things. Price of sardines at per dozen tins. And cases of 100 tins. Some obscure things. It seems obscure to us now, perhaps. Sardine prices, you know. 100 weight table. National Insurance Act. Discount of interest table. Anyway, let's get into it. So you're now going to see his actual writing in the diary. Whoops. Now it is written in a pencil. It's almost like a bluey purple pencil. There we go. Here's one of the classics. Friday the 7th of April. Okay. Weather beautiful. Light black plume. Plenty of sand. Bags. It's got a bit of a sense of humour. And they have this humour which is very sort of obvious throughout the year. As I say, it is quite tricky. Now you'll understand why my sister was working on this. It's quite tricky to decipher some of the writing. Some of he's quite a neat writer. And I can see my own handwriting. It's not the same as his. It's not quite as good as his really, but it's got a similar style. Must just run in the family, I suppose. It's the way that you write. It's interesting, isn't it? Because it's definitely got a similar shaping in the way that he forms his letters and things that I do. Though very few of us do write these days. Anyway, what I'm going to do is flip forward. What's he talking about there? He mentions AI. I don't think he's talking about artificial intelligence. I hope not. What's he saying? Stayed in a little cottage. Home from home, good bed. I can't quite make out the last bit. Anyway, it goes on and on. We'll flick forward a little bit. It's very delicate. I've got to be very careful with this because it has been handled by quite a few people since I think it's degraded slightly. But anyway, what does he say here? Fairly hot time between 6:30 and 8:30. Right, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the transcript out because I wanted you to see that it's genuine, but I want to get a quality of what's actually written in the diary. It's probably easier if I read it out from the transcript. There you have something that's truly remarkable. That has been in the trenches all over the Western Front. And it's been anywhere from Arras, Bethune. I'll show you the map. That's the next thing I'll show you, in fact. Well, let me just put this very carefully away. Please bear with me. Be patient. So we cannot be rushing that. Well, that's nearly 110 years old, and is clearly readable even today. So legible, no problem. And it finishes rather abruptly, and it just stops. He stops taking the diary. I'm wondering if he was parted from the diary when he was injured, basically. He then went to the British Field Hospital down near, memory's not good now, down to Southampton way. Excuse me, on the south coast. But what I'm going to show you here is the map. Yes, this is the important bit that I've got here, really. Does it go any further south? Does it go any further south of Arras? Because he did have he had a problem with his. It's Amiens. So you can see he was at Amiens as well. You see, but he avoided most of the really horrible battles. Let's zoom you in. He avoided most of the horrible battles until he got to Vimy Ridge, and then it all went badly. And by the way, if our friend, I'm sure he is Steve Keffer from Steve's Vintage Model Build, our good Canadian friend here on the channel. Well, of course, Vimy Ridge is famous for the Canadians. A year later, in 1917, they won a famous battle. It'd been a total stalemate there, and they managed to outsmart the Germans, outflank them, mainly through a lot of courage and a lot of sacrifice, to be quite honest. But they did beat the Germans handsomely, and this was the beginning of the sort of collapse of the German sort of front line, slow collapse, and they had the Battle of Arras as well. The Battle of Arras, the Battle of Amiens, all didn't really go the Germans' way. Anyway, zooming in, a bit closer than that, I think. Getting in a bit closer. Yeah, much closer, in fact. So you can see here, I've got these little numbers I've marked on the map, and these numbers correspond to entries in the diary, basically. So it's at Corby, and there's also some famous places. So if you look here where it says number 7, there's a little arrow. It's a little bit. Have I got the full zoom? Just bear with me, because this is worth hearing. So just to the east of Amiens, and you've got this little number 7, and there's an arrow. Place called Vaux-sur-Somme on the Somme, just northeast of Corbie. That is where the Red Baron crashed. It's just where the split is in the page, actually, isn't it? That's where the Red Baron crashed and was killed. So that's quite interesting. I actually went there near the old brickworks. Then you've got various other places like Fricourt, the famous Loch Nagar crater is just near there. And you've got various other really important places that are all mentioned in the diary. So what I'll do is I'll go back up. I've got to be careful, it's getting in bad shape. But this is where most of the action takes place in terms of 1916 for my grandfather. So George, he's constantly been moving around. Now, rather misleadingly, perhaps a bit confusing here if you look very closely, I've got some markers here. We talked about Adolf Hitler, and it wasn't spurious, I can assure you. But I've got some Nazi, symbols, but they weren't Nazis, of course, so that's actually slightly misleading. But Fawn-on-Wep is the village here, and that marker is where Hitler actually stayed in what is now above what is now the chemist's shop. And these three here, these are three bunkers. Ignore that one, but these are the three that Hitler used to be the runner between. This was the German front line. So the British were over here, and the Germans are over here. Neuve Chapelle, which I mentioned, this is probably the closest that my grandfather was. It's probably about a quarter of a mile away, maybe half a mile, on Aubers Ridge. And there was a massive battle here at Fromelles with the Australians, where the Australians had terrible losses. Yeah, they had a really tough time, and there's still today, they keep finding new bodies. There's like an industrial estate had been built up there, and every time they dig up the earth, they have to have this, very careful inspection of the ground using the radar detectors. I forgot what you call it. Yeah, they use it in time tube, don't they? Basically, the radar scan the ground to make sure there's no bodies. But Neuve Chapelle, this was a very important area. Now you had the Indian regiments were here. There's the Indian Memorial on this crossroads, which is quite a famous one. And also you had the Portuguese fighting here as well on behalf of the British. So the Indians and the Portuguese put up a tremendous battle and terrible sacrifices. And there's a famous crucifix which was actually copied in the film A Very Long Engagement with Audrey Tautou. And it's kind of copying this famous crucifix which is on the crossroads there. So this is where you had the Führer in 1916, and this is where my grandfather was. And you can see how close it is. It is literally, you can see each other, the pair of binoculars, no problem at all. You'd see the individual soldiers. So what might have been, isn't it really? But I'm sure that's true of a lot of other people as well. And as I say, between those four Nazi symbols, this is where Hitler used to operate. He used to be a runner back and forth in the trenches along that front line. So, yeah, interesting stuff indeed. There is an absolutely fantastic museum at Fromelles, and I actually went in there and met the curator, who unfortunately didn't speak any English at all, really, apart from a few words, so that was tricky. And I must have had a conversation with him over about, I'm guessing about 90 minutes. This would be, what year would this be? 2006? Yeah, 2006. The first time I went and I met this guy, and he showed me all sorts of stuff. Live hand grenades, live shells, and I was like, oh, I want my mummy. Please don't pick it up so enthusiastically when it's live, Things that have been dug out of the ground, terrifying stuff. Shells they've got there, they've got all sorts of things, weapons, ammunition, helmets from both sides. And they've actually expanded this museum. I think it's got a completely new building, because it was like in a town hall, like part of a town hall building upstairs in the loft really. But I believe it's been expanded. Anyway, it's worth looking up. So the Fromelles Museum. If you're Australian, any of you, like our friend Aubrey St John and many others, is it Paul Reed and several, I'm forgetting of his name now, all the Australian viewers and subscribers, you should really go take a look at this Fromelles Museum. And the Australians got this huge cemetery, the British soldiers, mainly Aussies. So you've got the Aussies there, you've got the Brits at Neuve Chapelle. If you look up Neuve Chapelle, there's some excellent videos on YouTube about the big battle they had there, which was pretty terrible. And you've got this line of all these, as you go along the front line, you see these bunkers every so often, which shows the Germans were really well organised, rather than, unlike the Brits in this respect. They either had dugouts rather than just trenches, or they had actual concrete bunkers, Quite remarkable. Anyway, I'll give you a bit of a flavour for it. Let me read you, though, quickly read through, because they're very short entries in this diary. They're just a line, usually, online. But quite remarkable stuff. So, this is where my sister helped a great deal. Sort of a family teamwork, really, this one. I can't get the thing to flick over. Come on. There we go. So, I'm just going to read you several of the excerpts. It's not every day. That you put an entry in. By the way, I've got my cup of tea here, if you don't mind. My Royal British Legion poppy. Don't forget your poppy, folks. Don't forget your poppy. Yeah, please support these guys. It isn't just the British Legion. They also support other charities that are, you know, like the German national charities that support some of their veterans and all that kind of thing, you know. So that's my poppy mug. That was very appropriate today. Right, now what were we saying? By the way, when I told this story, which I'd heard from my father, who had been told directly by George to my father, this story about slaughtering the pig, my auntie knew nothing about it. And when we have this, what I might do is put onto YouTube this interview or talk that we do between us, which I watched it again the other day. I've not seen it for years. I really enjoyed it. It's nice to see my auntie again, you know. She was my godmother as well. But it was lovely to see her again, looking on top form. She was sharp as a laser mentally. And she gives this brilliant, quite moving account of what it was like, you know, to have somebody in the family that survived this absolute horror, yet with horrible injuries. And she was saying that she didn't really think about it until they went to places like Blackpool, Fleetwood Beach, and they went on holiday and they had time on the beach, and my grandfather would be in his swimming trunks. Now, they weren't sort of skimpy trunks like they are today, but even so, they were sort of half-leg trunks, if you know what I mean. But even so, this horrible wound was there for all to see. There's a massive hole in his leg, which she described as like a small dinner plate, you know. And the other side was like the size of your fist, and then there was a smaller wound on the other leg, where this shrapnel had gone straight through him, you know. He's lucky he didn't bleed out, you know. Obviously it missed his key arteries, very lucky. But anyway, it really upset her then. She thought it was horrible, you know, and it made her frightened. This horrible wound. And she talks about this. So what I'll do is, I think I might put that on. The only problem is I would ask people to be very patient and respectful with it, because the audio's not great, I've got to be honest. But if you listen, you can hear what we're saying. It's clear enough. It's just that A, the audio's not excellent, and B, this was filmed in the village of Cheadle, right underneath the Manchester Airport flight path, in the summer with all the windows open because it was really hot, and we were worried about absolutely melting. And every time an aeroplane goes over, we actually have to keep stopping and restarting and say, "Look, jumbo jet," literally. All this aircraft goes over, and then we start again, you know. But it's remarkable to hear it, because at the end, there's quite a lot of her talking about the family and the impact on her. Then I go through some of the things I'm going to talk about now. But at the end, she makes some very amazing predictions about the future. She was very sort of, you could say downbeat, but she was making predictions about the nature of mankind, unfortunately. But she was absolutely spot on. And talking about, she basically predicts about, I don't know, 3 or 4 months before anything happens, she effectively predicts not directly, but indirectly, predicts the invasion of Ukraine. She predicts Putin. She predicts the Ukraine war. She predicts the war of drones. And it's amazing. When I watched it the other day, I thought, oh my God, it's almost like an oracle. She's predicting this stuff at least 4 to 6 months before any of it happened. It was really amazing, you know. And she had this view that there will always be dictators. The next war will be fought by machines, drones, as she put it. Well, she absolutely nails it, you know, and it's incredible. So just to take that in, I was like, wow, you know. I'd forgotten that she said those things. At the time, I just sort of thought, oh, well, you know, that's her opinion, that's fine. She nails it. Anyway, let's talk about the diary. So, I mentioned about my grandfather, because I say she didn't know about this thing about them catching the pig. She thought I was making it up. And it's in the interview. She said, what? I've never heard that. I said, you haven't? I said, my dad was always saying about how funny it was, this story about the pig. But he didn't like to talk about it because they're frightened they were getting a lot of trouble. You know, not supposed to go killing the local wildlife. But there was a small group of them on some patrol. And they decided that they needed some more food, and this thing was running around. Not a big pig, I don't think. It was probably a smallish one. And it says, to prove the point though, I said to her, I said, did you not notice it says, the very first entry is 7th of January 1916, the 6th Butchers Regiment. That's all it says. In other words, that's like a private joke, wink wink, between him and his mates, obviously. That they've obviously chopped this pig up. And my dad didn't know about the diary, so when my dad told me these stories about this pig incident, He had no knowledge. He'd never read this diary, and he'd got no knowledge of it. And as soon as I read that, I thought, I know what he's telling me. It's this bloody pig, you know. and as soon as I told her the story, and she said, I wonder what that... Oh, now it all joins up, you know. Anyway. He says, Saturday the 8th of Jan, left Rouen, 9 p.m, and arrived at the station and trained for Pont Remy, marched to Ailly-le-Haut-Cloqueur. And they did use trains, of course, for long distance journeys. Distance of about 8 miles here. We had some very strenuous training manoeuvres, etc. Stayed in a little cottage. Home from home, good bed within, A1. Not AI, it's me, A1. Well done, Margaret. and he goes on. Next day, left Ailly-le-Haut-Cloqueur and marched to Piquenay, 19 kilometres the same night. We were called out to a fire at a cotton mill to put the fire out. Rested here until the 30th. Next week, on the Sunday, he says, 12 miles march to Cardenet. 12 miles march. Left Cardenet, this is the next day. Left Cardenet for another march to Point Noyelle. 6 miles, rested here. The next day, left Point Noyelle for Vary-sous-Corbie. This is near where the Red Baron was shot down. 12 miles here for about 7 miles. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. So he's got connections with the Red Baron, connections with the Führer. Vary-sous-Corbie. I'm in the wrong place, aren't I? I'm in the wrong bit of the map here. Yeah, Vary-sous-Corbie. About a mile from where the Red Baron comes down, literally. Less than a mile, I'd say. And I went to this village, and there's a little British plot. It's quite tiny villages, you know, and they all have these beautiful British cemeteries. Some of them are absolutely huge, to be honest. Anyway, so is it Vary-sous-Corbie? View from the trenches is pretty. Little village. This hardly been touched by any shell fire. Now, I've been to this village and on quite a nice day, so I know what he means. This day we left our billets for a 24-hour turn in the trenches at Fricourt, number 8 trench. Now, Fricourt was right in the front line when they had the Battle of the Somme, which was the 1st of July. So thank God he wasn't there on that at that particular time. I say Fricourt, I think it's pronounced Fricourt. He says, we had some casualties, but very lucky, as Fritty, the Germans, exploded a mine, something new to us, just on our left. Some shake on the ground. Then the next 2 days later, he goes to the trenches in Fricourt again for 8 days. Very heavy shelling here. Here are our casualties. We had 4 killed, 1 in each company, and 12 wounded. About 30 men left us here with trench feet and very bad sickness. Horrible conditions, yeah. This is in February, so it'll be cold, wet. Ooh. Very bad weather, snow and frost, rain and whizzy bangs from Fritty. German whizzy bangs are German, like these exploding mortars that go over. 18th of Feb, very narrow escape. 3 small shells bursting just 15 yards from the action trench that we were in. 15 yards, gee. 20th of Feb, relieved by the 8th Devons. Stand to at our billet. Huns attacking, all attacks repulse. Our guns playing havoc with the attacking forces. Many have heavy losses. Thursday the 24th, bath and change of clothing, not before time. Having a bath was like winning the lottery for these guys. You know, they were wearing clothes for 3 weeks without having a shower or a bath. It's very itchy cloth the British had as well. It's like a sack of potatoes there. The linen that was used. He says, we now left... No, this is on the 25th of Feb. Left Vary-sous-Corbie for unknown destination and marched 6 miles aboard motor buses. Sorry, marched 6 miles, then boarded motor buses. Sorry. Arrived at Longno. Now, Longno is just near where the airport is at Amiens, just on the east side of the Amiens. I actually went there to the McDonald's for my lunch near the airport. Longno, there it is. I'll just zoom you in so you can see what I'm on about. If you see the map and you can interact it, it makes it a lot more interesting. They're not just vague names, you know. So here you can see you've got Amiens, Longno is just where number 9 is, just above my thumb there. So they've marched, basically, they've travelled down this road. And this, of course, this road here in green, just above the A for Amiens, that's where the Amiens prison is and was when the mosquitoes in World War II bombed it. But I digress. Anyway, just going back. I'm just trying to keep this map, it's definitely past its best. I'm trying to keep it in reasonable condition if I can. He goes on. He says, arrived at Longno. Don't know where we are now. Terrible weather. Well, he's actually quite close to the city of Amiens. Pardon. Amiens and Albert were the two key towns in the First World War for the British in the northern sector, and then Ypres further up to the north. So those three: Ypres, Arras, Albert, Amiens. Oh, start with an A, don't they? Apart from Ypres. Anyway, he goes on to say, during the whole of our move, embarked at Longno at 8 p.m. and arrived at Hazebrouck at 9 a.m. the following morning. So that must mean they went on the train. He doesn't make it clear, but I'm pretty sure he did, because Hazebrouck is way up. This is now up at the other end of this. You can tell it's on the other side of the map. It's much further up. Past Lawns, we've gone right to the northern sector now. Not far, in fact, from Ypres. Not far from Ypres. Ypres is here. It's just like that. It makes it easier. And Hazebrouck, where my thumb is. So you see, it's not far from Ypres at all. Again, on this dreaded front line, and he goes on to say, after travelling all night, marched from Hazebrouck to Wallon-Capelle, and after messing about for an hour or more, we got settled in a nice barn. So he's gone to Wallon-Capelle, which I'm pretty sure I've marked on here. Yes, it's just there, look, number 11. This is why I marked them with these numbers. So where my thumb is, that's Hazebrouck, and then just to the west, Wallon-Capelle, which is about, yeah, it's about 5 or 6 miles, isn't it? Where number 11 is. Okay. Now this is a very tough part of the front line around here. In fact, Bosingham here, this has had a famous museum, and they've restored the trenches there next to the industrial estate. It's quite famous. They found British dugouts and all sorts. It's actually worth a visit, Bosingham. So if you're ever over there, you should definitely look that up. And then he goes on to say, he's in the barn, nice barn to sleep in, which is for them nice and warm and cosy and pleasant. Out of the rain and the wind. More training here, and then route marching and physical training, etc. A lot of ongoing training, keeping them sharp all the time. Left Wallon-Capelle and marched to Bosingham, that's why I put the 11 there, to Bosingham, 6 kilometres, stayed here for 17 days. Well, there was some pretty horrible battles there later. I think it was later in, I think it was in the autumn after the Somme. Second or third Battle of Ypres. All along that line, it was pretty tough, I can tell you. You've only got to see any of these. If you look it up, Bosingham, if you look it up, you'll see some pretty, gritty stuff went on. And then he carries on with his diary entry saying, training as usual till the end of March. Left Bosingham for Villers-Bouquin. So he's now got, this is what makes me, I find this very strange in terms of the rationale of what's going on here. If indeed there was any. Because look how they go back and forth all the time. It's in a non-logical way. So they were, it's almost like they're just obeying orders all the time, do you know what I mean? So they were here, and then they went here, and now they've gone over here. Back and forth, yeah? Villers-Bouquin. So it's not far from Merville. And he says, everybody is completely done up, which means they're absolutely knackered. Lots have dropped out of the march. We're staying here. In other words, they've overdone it and worn them out. I mean, there's a fine line, isn't there, between keeping them sharp and actually wearing them out too much. But it's better than sitting in a trench day after day after day, I think. Then he says, 29th of March, stand to for a gas attack.
And then on the 30th of March, left via Bequin for Merville, which I showed just south, for a bath and a change. And then left Merville for Ries-Belleau, which is number 15. Yes, number 15. So they're heading south again, heading back downwards. For the trenches. We are now about half a mile to the left of the ruined village of Neuve-Chapelle, 16. This is near Hitler now. So this is on the 3rd of April 1916. And that means they have gone up to Neuve-Chapelle. Neuve-Chapelle. I've lost it. Givenchy. Where is it? Come on, I had it all marked, haven't I? We've gone further south, haven't we? The Orbers Ridge. Here we go, sorry. Yeah, it's just okay, it's there. So they've tracked now to the southeast, and they've gone to Neuve-Chapelle. So they're basically here where it says 19. Okay. Zoom in a bit more. Helps if you can actually picture it. So Bethune is here, and Neuve-Chapelle is here. So they're basically at this crossroads where the Indian Memorial is, where my finger is. And then this is where Hitler is. He's back and forth here. This is where he spends his year. Scary, isn't it? To think how close they were. You know. You read this diary and you're thinking, come on, Grandad George, pop up and put a cap in his ass. And the whole world be a better place, I'm pretty sure. But anyway. For the Germans too. Very much so for the Germans. It would have done the Germany a great favour if he'd shot Hitler. But anyway. So he goes on to say, I'm speculating, aren't I? Yeah. Very quiet here until our guns opened up and began to shell the enemy's trenches after 6 p.m. Which of course they stabilised, and we had a very hot time ourselves afterwards. For about an hour. We had about a dozen casualties. The weather is beautiful today on the Friday, next day. Like Blackpool, plenty of sand, bags, which I showed you in the diary. Today, Saturday the 8th of April, grand air duel. 2 to 3 hours. Eventually the enemy planes were forced down onto his own lines. Next day, General Colonel Ruston killed by a sniper. He was brought down immediately. Oh, is that General Colonel? GC. Colonel, I think it's Colonel. Colonel Ruston brought down by a sniper. Next day, brought down immediately afterwards. In other words, he's been taken back to be buried. Relieved by the Black Watch today. That's the Scots, arriving at billets at about 12:30 a.m. Left Belleau for Merville again. And then next day, general inspection by General OB Division. Next day, left Merville for Telobes or Telebes. Here we had 2 days rest before going to the trenches at Telebes, which I've marked as number 17. Where's 17? Me over the page again. 17. Interesting, I've got a feeling it's off to the west. So you're not showing here. 17, 16. Maybe I've not marked it for some reason, because I couldn't find it. Maybe. No, it's not marked. Yeah, when he talks about Pont Remy and Ailey Clock Hocker, that's near Abbeville, that's actually near the coast. Nowhere near the front line, that's 100 miles away. So obviously that was when they went on the trains. But I can't find this Telebes. I seem to remember having problems trying to find it, and I couldn't find it on any map. Now some places do change their names over time. They get renamed, especially when the war's devastated it so much. But it's not there. It's definitely not there. Yeah, we won't worry about that one. 17. Passing 3 villages that were completely wrecked, we arrive in our trenches at Festubert, number 18, at about 11 p.m, feeling completely done up after the march.
18 Festival. Here we go. So this is just to the east of Bethune. So again, it's not far from this Neuve Chapelle and still not far from Hitler and co. And he goes on to say, relieved by the Black Watch at midnight, arrived at a place called La Coutre, number 19, where we had a bath. Bon, good. 19 La Coutre. So again, it's really close to Neuve Chapelle. Again, he's actually not travelling a great distance here. But they probably had a marching around in circles. He's not gone directly from one to the other. This is the problem. Constantly marching, constantly on standby, you know. But this is where the nucleus of the activity seems to be around here. So again, he's 2.5 miles from Hitler. Come on, Grandad, do that. Let's do this thing, you know. Come on. I'm willing him to do it, and it's not going to happen. I believe he's a good shot, by the way, as well. But anyway, he goes on to say, next day, lovely morning, but a very heavy bombardment. Easter Monday, 24th of April. Beautiful morning. Left for Hingjet, a petite little village of about 12 kilometres distance. Here we are visiting for a few days for the usual training. And that I've marked it as number 20. So that's just near Bethune, a bit further south west towards the city of Bethune. Is it a city or a town? Town, I think. And he goes on to say, and this will come, we're getting more than halfway through now, this will come to a very abrupt end, so bear with me. He goes on to say, still glorious weather again, end of April, 26th. We hear a terrific bombardment in the distance. General inspection by General of OC Brigade again. Bombardment still continues. Next day, Friday. Up at 3:30 AM for a walk around the country. On the way back, I get smells of gas shifting over. Several cases of gas poisoning in the vicinity. Bombardment more fierce than ever. So gas was used a lot. You know, it's a constant fear. You've always got to have your gas mask on you. Monday, 1st of May. Stand 2, Mayday. Stand 2 for a heavy gas attack at 7:40 PM. We got the stand down at 11:20 in the evening. So 3 hours of that. Ow. 4 hours, I should say. I sat on a haystack until 12:30 watching the bombardment, which is terrific. It's a grand sight when it's in the distance. And he goes on. Wednesday the 3rd of May. Left Hingjet for the trenches at Givenchy. Now this is where we need to really prick our ears up, okay? This is when he actually gets put in the front line, okay? So left Hingjet for the trenches at Givenchy. Myself going one day before the battle to act as a guide. He was promoted to sergeant at the start of this year, by the way, so he was clearly very good as a soldier. So that's it. He's then moved north. We've then gone from... where was it? He was at Hingjet, wasn't he? 21, is that? 21. So he's going now down to Givenchy, or as most people know it, think of it as Vimy Ridge. Givenchy is just a quarter of a mile northwest of Vimy Ridge, where the Canadians a year later had their huge battle and victory. But in 2016, not a very nice place to be at all. So we are just south of the city of Lens. And we're not far from Lewes, which is of course where Rudyard Kipling's son Jack died. Yeah, and the famous slag pits, and I'll show you some photographs in a minute to put all this into context. So here we are, where it says number 21. That's his final destination, quite literally almost. The British cemetery's right there. You've got the Canadian Memorial. Sorry, just move this. There we go. Canadian Memorial, which is fantastic. And by the way, I have been through this area on the Orient Express with my wife when it was her turn for a big birthday present. We went on this train track where my finger is now. I'm tracing the train track, and we literally followed it down there right past Vimy Ridge, and you can see the huge memorial to the Canadians for their sacrifices. Really fantastic. So if you ever get a chance, Steve, or anybody else from Canada, you want to go and see this, it's amazing. So this is where we have, some fairly amazing. Sorry, I'm just looking on the other side of this map because there is right here, just off the map,
just literally where my finger is here. You can get some focus. There's a French cemetery which is one of the most amazing you'll ever see. It's a bit like the Normandy US cemetery. It is enormous, and I'll show you. It should be marked there, shouldn't it? Cemetery British National Necropole Cemetery British. Just looking for the marking of it. It should be marked as the French Souches. I think they've all put it in together. It's a little bit unclear, but anyway, there is the most tremendous French cemetery, one of many, and this is where all the action happens for the last few entries of the diary, and I will now read them to you so you know where it is. So we're just near Arras. Arras is just to the south, Lons to the northeast, as you saw. Let's get into this and see what really happens next. So he arrives at Givenchy for a date with destiny that nobody wants to have, to be quite honest. And he goes on to say, "This is this is some warm shop. I've not been many houses before. The square yeds," that's a slang, a term of abuse for the Germans, "were pleased to meet us and sent us whiz-bangs, rifle grenades and a new projectile that I've not seen before called Rumjar, some sort of aerial mine that spins, I believe. But we'll soon quieten him up with a speedy return of fire." They don't like it up 'em, Captain, they don't like it up 'em. "The usual morning's straffle goes on, but there are no casualties. Straffing throughout the day continues. Tuesday the 9th of May. Night time, another straffle, but not so fortunate this time. We suffer 4 casualties about 8 p.m. We see on run night on bombing attack." Run night on bombing attack. Translate as best we can, you know. Transcript, I mean. "Attack on large scale, lit up the sky with explosions and bombs and shells. 2 of our officers wounded by a rifle grenade." Now the Germans had the high ground. This is the problem with Vimy Ridge. The Germans have the high ground on the east, and the Brits, Canadians, etc. have the slightly lower ground, slightly to the west. But it is a high point. But I mean, today it's covered in forests or trees. But even today, you cannot go wandering around here because there's so much live munitions. They've cordoned it all off. Anyway, we're on the very last half page, so bear with me, folks. "Here I'm in charge on the 11th of May. I'm in charge of a sap. Only being 30 yards from the Germans, they even shout over at us. 12th of May, really very worrying. A really hot time between 6:30 p.m. and 8:30 p.m. We all got all sorts: shrapnel, nerve gas, whiz bangs, grenades, bombs, the aerial torpedoes, Rumjar, and it was some hot. This is proper dangerous now. Obviously, he's right in the front line now. 14th of May, we get relieved by the Black Watch, now in the first reserve village at Givenchy." Now, I've had a meal at Givenchy. I think my wife and I, when we subsequently went with her, you'll see some photos. There's a little cafe at Givenchy on the corner between Vimy Ridge and Givenchy Village, and there's this really nice cafe on the corner. And they do lovely, they do omelettes and flapjacks and they do waffles and all sorts of lovely things. Sadly, George didn't have that advantage. Anyway, again, a very heavy bombardment on our right toward the battlefield and Lewes, where Rudyard Kipling's son died, John. 16th of May, sappers spring a mine on our section. More strafing where our artillery give them a troubled time. Germans shell our village, a big shell smashing into a big tree about 15 yards from us, bringing it right down. Thursday the 18th of May, an aeroplane duel every day. Night time we sat in a field out the back of our billet. About 30 of us were playing house when Fritz put 3 shrapnel shells right over us. Strange to say that no one was injured, but to see the Russians scramble, bits of shell whizzing around, was terrifying. You can feel that time's running out here. Oh.
he goes on to say, Monday the 22nd of May, an unusual occurrence in this part of the line was to see an aeroplane. Mayon, the Mad Major as he was called. This man was, I don't know who this was, we tried to trace this, we can't find it, it could have been his spelling or something, I don't know. This man was very daring, the most daring pilot I've ever seen. He used to go up high until he was right over the German lines and then would come down with a swoop to within 100 yards of the German trenches and train his machine guns on the trench and sweep right along, terrifying the troops. Machine gun on rifle fire used to go up at him, but he didn't trouble. He is said to have accounted for a great many of the enemy. And he writes this over multiple days because he's giving this colourful account of the aerial battle. And he writes it over, what do I remember? Basically over a week's worth of pages in the little diary. Obviously he was quite impressed. Now this is amazing. Here we go. So he said Wednesday the 31st of May. He's written this on Wednesday the 31st of May because he's gone and written across all these pages, so it sounds a bit weird, but bear with me. May the 12th to the 27th, I was admitted to hospital, sent down to base at Rouen, which is right to the west, okay, nowhere near the front line on the battlefield at all, halfway to Normandy. Saturday the 3rd of June, had an operation, my tonsils taken out. When you realise this is just days before he gets hit. Monday the 12th of June, joined battalion back at Givenchy, 21 again. 21 is the number. Just behind the line. Tuesday the 13th, unlucky 13, 11 casualties, 5 killed and 6 wounded. Wednesday the 14th of June, went into the front line. Our artillery bombarded the enemy trenches heavily. 6 more casualties for us though. Thursday the 15th of June. Another violent bombardment by our artillery. The enemy replied furiously. And then it goes to the Friday the 16th of June. And then on the 18th of June is the day he has to go over the top. That is the last entry in his diary because he goes over the top on the Sunday the 18th and he gets hit. And the rest of the story you've heard. It's a few notes at the end and it says, at this point we believe that he was wounded and rescued by Glandorf from no man's land, who then gave himself up and saves George's life in doing so. And it says a couple of bits of background information at the bottom notes. September the 26th to the 27th, the previous year, Battle of Lewes. That's where Rudyard Kipling's son died. Givenchy trenches are at Vimy Ridge, Hill 145. The Canadians were victorious there, April 1917. July the 1st, 1916 was the Battle of the Somme. So he at least... This may have done him a big favour. I haven't read the book fully because it will tell you what happened next after this issue. For him, I think some of them got moved after the Somme, so it may have saved his life, even though it was a very unpleasant experience. How amazing! Now, a couple of other things I want to mention to you just today, very quickly. One is we have a trench map. I'm going to show you. I'm going to tell you about how it all began in terms of telling this story. I have here a cutting from the Warlord comic. It doesn't have the date on it, but I can tell you, I'm pretty sure it's 1978. So this is like written by a child with a bit of help from his mum. So it's a very super cut down version of what you've all just heard in the video so far. Look at this. I got a £1 postal order, for sending this through to the magazine. Aid from the enemy. And it says, make sure it's in focus. During the First World War, my granddad fought in the trenches in France. One day at dawn, the order was given to charge. Well, I think it was a bit more than that, but anyway. The shelling was so fierce that halfway across no man's land, Grandad was badly wounded in the arm and the leg. Both legs, in fact. A young German officer saw his plight and helped him under heavy fire to a British field hospital. My granddad named his house Glandorf after the gallant German officer, as he would certainly have died if the German had not assisted him. There you go, Peter Oxley. Seascale, Cumbria, where I used to live at the time, in the late 70s. There you go. So now you know I'm not making it up. You see, it's a bit discoloured because of the age of it.
That's a cutting from the Warlord, from the viewers, or the readers' stories page. Or they always say, let us know if you've got a story you want us to publish about one of your parents or grandparents. Interesting stories about courageous acts and colourful stories. So there you go. So I'm not pulling your leg on this. I first wrote about it in 1978. We have here a couple of maps of Vimy Ridge. They're not the best ones. I've got a better one which I will show you later. But Givenchy's on there. You see with the arrow, the little blue arrow. Givenchy. Vimy here, Hill 145, which is it's basically this hill here really. This is kind of where my finger is Hill 145. Givenchy is here. Along here is where the little shop is I mentioned, that's got the rather nice pancakes and waffles and things. Here is the actual trench map of the time with Givenchy. And I'm going to show you some photographs now which will put this in a bit more sort of literal context for you in colour. But it names all the names of the actual trenches. Blighty Trench, Butter, Edward, Henry, Lucas, George Trench. That's the appropriate one for us, isn't it? George Trench, look at that. And some of these great craters that they've got as well. The Bois crater, which is one I'll show you in a minute. So it's a little bit unclear. Then here talks about the Stockport exhibition, and here it is, Keep the Home Fires Burning. This is the exhibition that this diary appeared in, and they kept it on for 2 more years. They actually sent me a letter requesting my permission to keep it longer, which I granted them. And you can see here some of the exhibits, and you'll see this better in the photograph I'm going to show you. It's a bit of a bad photocopy of this, but I'll show you that in more detail in a minute. On top of all this, we have a couple of amazing things to finish off with before I go to the photos. I'm going to keep this. I'm going to keep this and read this to you. This is my auntie's little statement that she gave. Sorry, I just found a better one to show you. The auntie's statement where she talks about her father, which she actually reads out in the video. So I'll keep that till later and I'll read you that another time. But here we've got some of the original from the boards in the Stockport Museum. And here is George with his friend, one of his pals in the Six Cheshires. And then you can see here, this is a bit of the transcripted diary. Really very worrying, fairly hot between 6:30 and 8:30. All sorts of shrapnel, gas, whiz bangs, grenades, bombs and aerial torpedoes. Scary, scary stuff indeed. And then perhaps the most amazing thing of all. I had a neighbour here, where I live now, who was working for Volkswagen Bentley, working for Bentley but owned by Volkswagen, and he'd been transferred from Volkswagen. And I told him this story, he read it in the local website, and I also showed it to him. He was very interested. And he put me in touch with someone. We're trying to trace this guy Glandorf, or his descendants. We weren't very successful. But we did get a chap called Dr. Christian Glandorf, who is at Braunschweig, which is actually really close to Wolfsburg, where the Volkswagen plant is in North Germany. And he gave us all his... there's a couple of names here, he told us to contact them. One we got no reply from, but this was the one from... It's the Braunschweig one, this is the other one. This is the other one. But let me read you the letter I got back from Germany. So this is the guy from Braunschweig, and he says, Dear Sir and Madam, thank you very much for being so kind to tell me the story of what happened during World War One. This is dated February, by the way, 10th of Feb 2014. He says, my name is Dr. Christian Peter Glandorf, the only son of Karl Heinz Glandorf, born 17th of May 1935, who is the oldest son of Albert Bernd Michael Glandorf, born 1899, which makes him just a couple of years younger than my grandfather, 5 years younger. 2 years before my birth in 1970, Grandad Albert died in 1968. His father, my grandfather, was born. His son, he means. His father. His son, my grandfather, was born on the 9th of December 1855. 1855. That couldn't be him. Sorry, he's right. His father, my grandfather, great-great-grandfather he means, just lost in translation, 1855. It couldn't be him, he'd be way too old to be serving. No, it's not him. That would make him 60 or 70. As you mentioned, the first name is missing. We don't know his Christian name. Maybe you have more detailed info. But that would really help a bit. So in this letter, I'll send you the original copies of my grandfather's ancestor's passport. Maybe this will help you a bit. Please let me know what you find out. Well, I haven't had much luck, I'm afraid. But his final paragraph is very moving. Listen to this. He says, although I have been born in 1970, so he's 5 years younger than me, I feel deeply ashamed for what has been done in Germany's name during both World War One and World War Two. Things have not been right and never will be. So if the story you wrote at least gives a glimmer of light during that period of time, I am very glad to now be knowing it, because it helps me as much as it did for your family. My very kindest regards, Christian Glandoff. Isn't that nice? Isn't that nice? These stories are so, they do bring a little bit of a feel-good factor, Not all the Germans were bad even then, and there weren't Nazis, of course, in the World War One. There was another bit of a crazy war, wasn't it? We all know it started for all the wrong reasons. Very strange war, really. All to do with alliances and allegiances between nations and all that kind of rubbish. Anyway, we're going to move on, and I'm going to show you some photographs, and I'm going to call it a day for today. But one more thing, which I'll just give you a flavour of. This is my play. Based on my grandfather's experiences. Don't think it's going to win any prizes, Pulitzer Prize or anything like that. But this is my own work. It's actually quite a short play, to be honest. It's not long. I can read it in, well under an hour. Which I might well do. And it's based on, I have to tell you that it does go, it's very factual. Most of it is very factual. But the ending, it goes off into a what-if scenario. And it concerns the Führer. So we all know that he actually got gassed and he was out of the war at the end in this famous castle where he was being recuperated. And it's, what if that hadn't have happened? How would the final day of the war have played out if he was still there? He'd become very radicalised, we know this, to use the modern parlance. Had an obsession with the Jews and this, that and the other, and all sorts of hatred in him. But I basically go one step further and say this is what I think would have happened had he still been back in the front line. Because he hated the idea of the armistice, even before it was agreed. He was dead against it. He wanted Germany to win the war at all costs. Sound familiar? Yeah? And I basically expand on that and take it to its logical conclusion. And I actually use a bit of this true story about this German, the good German. So it's about, on the last episode, it's about the good German and the bad German, if you know what I mean. And it's a sort of a thought-provoking thing. So I might get into that on another day and read it to you. Finally, though, I'm going to show you some photos to put all this in some proper context. And you can see just the scale of this epic and very unfortunate conflict. I have, by the way, here, I think this might be my Ypres map. Is it Ypres? Oh, it's Vimy. It's the original Vimy map. Hold on a second. Oh, I'm spoiling you. Oh my word. It is the genuine original. Well, it's not original, it's a reprint. But it is based on the original Vimy map. Still quite brown at the edges. Not sure if that wasn't done for effect. If I can just get this out for you. So here it is. This is what you sort of saw a bit of a photocopy of. But this is the original it was taken from. So here we have Vimy, just next to my thumb. You can see it says Vimy. And I mean, obviously I can't pinpoint the exact spot where my grandfather was killed. Sorry, I beg your pardon. He wasn't killed. He was wounded. I beg your pardon. When he was hit, basically, in this assault, when he got the injury to his leg. But it's somewhere over here. So we've got Givenchy here. I'm just going to get my bearings. Givenchy here. You can see the railway line even then. Here's the railway line. Sorry, that's the road. Where's the railway line? Where is the railway line? It wasn't there. Actually, it wasn't there. So that's come later. It The railway line only goes to there, doesn't it? Interesting. Let me zoom you back slightly for this. There we go. See what I'm on about. So here we've got Givenchy here. So we're pretty sure that my grandfather was in these areas here, where close to where the road is now, and there's a famous crater which I'll show you in a second. Not far from the George Trench, appropriately named. And today you've got all these German trenches, which were the ones that are marked here. And the German trenches are very different to the British trenches. They're much more fortified. And you can see that it says here the Bois de Champorin. And it's around here that you've got the modern day visitor centre. And you can actually you go up to, it's about here actually. It's about here, I think, where my finger is. Right across where the German front line crosses through it, because they've got some restored ones. They've also got these tunnels underneath which you can go and walk around, which is absolutely amazing. Definitely recommend it to you. Visit around the tunnels where they were trying to mine under each other and blow themselves up, blow each other up. But yeah, your Hill 145 is, keep losing it. Should be about here. Should be about here. Yeah, it's about there, isn't it? And that's where the Canadian monument is. But it's tricky, you know. To try and get your bearings, it takes a little while on these things. There you have it. That's the actual Vimy map of the First World War with the trenches marked on. So that's impressive. But let's have a look at the photos, because I think this will be the final thing that will give you some context for you. And I hope that this will impress. So let's have a look. First of all, we're going to start here. So this is just near Vimy. This is the French battlefield that I spoke of. And this will give you some sense of perspective. Here we have got, I think there's 10,000 Frenchmen here, dead in this field. And that's Mrs. O in one of the trenches at Vimy Ridge itself, one of the German trenches that's been restored. Then we've got, look at the scale of this. Just take this in for a second. Just look at that. "10,000 men, Frenchmen." There's a British cemetery as well just to the right, and it's got about, I think, about 200 Brits in it, including the Canadians, etc., and some of the Australians. That just goes on and on. I think it's bigger than the Normandy American Cemetery. It's certainly on a similar scale to it. It just goes on and on and on and on and on into infinity almost. As far as the eye can see, you see the beautiful precision of the way they've put these crosses in, so forming these slightly macabre patterns and shapes, you know. It's just unbelievable. And this is the place I was trying to spot on the map, which is just next to Vimy, and it is in fact, it's near Souchez, isn't it? And Neuville-Selaste. Cemetery Allemagne, that's the German cemetery. Cemetery British, where's the French one? Doesn't seem to mark it. It's near Souchez anyway. Souchez. This is, only a quarter of a mile from there. In fact, it's marked on the map, it's so big. This is the Souchez mine crater, and right next to another British cemetery. And this gives you an idea of when these mines go, how big they are when they've been tunnelling under each other. This is looking back in the direction of that French cemetery. This is Mrs. O. These are the slag pits at Lewes, the Battle of Lewes from 1915, where Rudyard Kipling's son died, of course. And this is a beautiful photograph, which I need to zoom back for. So this is Lewes, but this is the Canadian Memorial. This incredible Vimy Ridge Memorial that they built, which is absolutely stunning. You've got to see it to appreciate it, really. Mrs. O, there it is. That is the memorial. It's absolutely enormous.
You can see it for, you know, probably 60 miles, 100 miles. So obvious, right on top of the hill. Now we're at one of the Hitler bunkers. This is literally one of the bunkers Hitler was in, no question. This is the one at Orbers Ridge, the one that's near Fromell village. I'll just flick back, actually, if you just bear with me one moment. That's my car parked in front of it. That was my Seat Leon Cooper that I had at the time. Here we go. 19th to 20th of July 1916. The 5th line, the trench, Germans, October 1914 to September 1918. So, yeah, so it tells you how long it was there. How the Germans held the line there for a long time. Long time. Right, I'll just zoom forward again. So that's me in front of it. Yeah, and Hitler was here, it should say on it, because there's no doubt about it. And further behind, there's one 3 times the size, but you can't get access to it, not easily anyway. And then there's some images from the First World War. Genuine images these are from the First World War. Of some of the troops on the British side. Now flicking back, if you just bear with me again, I go to the other end, to talk about the museum and the exhibits in Stockport. There is George Dickinson, my grandfather. And he died in 60s. I think it was about 1963, I think. My memory's failing me here. I should have that written down somewhere. That's very bad. But early mid-60s he died, just before I was born, in fact, sadly. I never met him. But you can see here, some of this, the museum's displays, saying here our casualties were 4 killed, 1 from each company. It's quotes from the diary I've just given you. And you can see his medals in the foreground, if I can just zoom it back again. As his medals, which we'll look at in a second. That's my Auntie Margaret Ashton, with me. On the left is giving this interview, this sort of talk we did. And that's her posing for photographs in front of the screen. Talking about her father. And this is the actual number 3, Sergeant George Dickinson. He got his own sort of displays. Pretty impressive, really. And this is George Dickinson here, in fact. And they're wearing the uniform of the injured servicemen. All wore this so they could easily be identified in case they went walkabout. A lot of them suffered from PTSD and things like that, so they all wore this uniform like that. There he is. And again, serving in the front line, various quotes, and there's a quote again from George talking about the shrapnel gas and whiz bangs at the bottom, and aerial torpedoes, etc, etc. And there we go. So that gives you a bit of a flavour for it. I hope you thought that was interesting. In addition, I have got a couple of other items here. We've got the Poems of the Great War, an anthology, which is, I might read you 1 or 2 of those out, one of the other shows I'm going to do to talk about it. And we also have, be careful some of this because that was given to me as a gift, so I'm just going to put my glove back on actually. Because we have here, and this was given to me by my Auntie Margaret in response to all the work I did for this. You can see that it's a soldier in the trenches looking over the parapet. And it's the King's Shilling, a special issue by the Daily Mail. And it says on the back, and it's quite hard to read this, you might read this better than me in fact, because it's very small writing. Between 1914 and 1918, more than 6 million men from Britain and Ireland enlisted to serve in the First World War. Upon enlisting, they received the King's Shilling, which was a day's pay for a private. The expression "to take the King's Shilling," dating back to the 18th century, meant that a man had agreed to serve his country as a soldier or sailor. There you go. Let's have a little look at it. I don't think I've ever actually taken it out. Can I get it out? Will it come out, I wonder? Hang on a second. I think I'll just zoom back for this for a sec. Can I get that out of there? I can. I believe it will come out. I think we can do this. I'm going to do something I've never done before. Never taken this out. I think we should see the King's shilling, don't you? Take the King's shilling. There we go. Look at that! World War I, 1914 to 1918. Now this is absolutely a recreation that the Daily Mail have done. It's not the original coin, but it is a perfect copy of it. Except it says the Daily Mail on the top, commemorative coin. Actually that's a little bit annoying, but anyway, it's got King George there. Yeah. It's King George, wasn't it? Not King Edward. I'm being a bit ignorant now. Brain's gone. Anyway, you get the idea. Isn't that nice? Take the King's shilling and do your duty for your country. That's what people say. Don't be a conscientious objector. And then over here, and this is another thing that my auntie gave me. This is another commemorative thing. Armistice, the end of World War I. Isn't this beautiful? I thought that was actually very nice. And it's heavy. This is really heavy. 100 years. Yeah, there we go. World War... Wipe. World War I centenary. It's so big, I need to zoom back, don't I really? There we go. There we go, centenary of World War I. What a beautiful thing. I love the thing in the front with the Union Jack on it. That's really well done, isn't it? Powerful imagery there. Very powerful imagery indeed. Yeah. Yeah, I like that. A very memorable gift from my auntie. I've no idea whether it cost a lot of money or it didn't, but it's the emotional value and the impact that she gave me that. It goes with all this stuff together beautifully. Anyway, that's it from me for today. I'm going to talk some more about this if you're interested. Even if you aren't. I'm going to talk some more about it. But I'm going to talk about this book, give you a few quotes to give you experiences not just from my grandfather, but some other quotes from the book as well, which are impressive. I've also got somewhere, I've got this pictures and a diary from my grandfather's trip to Bergen in Norway, which is interesting. So that's going to be worth having a read of as well. Also given to me by my auntie. Some very impressive stuff that's really worth preserving, you know. And I say, the fact that we have on the back of John Hartley's book, like right where my thumb is now, my grandfather sitting there, and on the back of the book, it's quite, yeah, that's quite nice, you know. He's not forgotten. His contribution is well remembered, and because of that diary, he became, you know, well known all over. People came from far and wide to see that exhibition all over Manchester and the UK. It was very, I say it was held on for an extra 2 years. So the diary has been seen by thousands and thousands of people, which wouldn't have otherwise been the case. So I think it was, lest we forget, right, that we remember these men, and what they had to go through was pretty awful, to be honest. Not driven by great strategy, let's be honest about it. It was pretty poor. But I hope I've given you a glimpse of it. So I'm going to talk about the book. I'm going to read the play to you, and I will show you the interview with my auntie, and you can see how it affected her life and the life of my family, if you will, before me. And I think that's worth seeing, even though they said the audio is not brilliant. But it is quite amazing the way that she summarised at the end, and she concludes that, sadly, you know, we're sort of winding it up saying it's the war to end all wars, and it wasn't, of course. And she just said, no, man will carry on doing this stupidity because that's what man does. And she almost predicted Vladimir Putin. She really did. I mean, obviously he was around already, but she predicted that somebody would do something stupid like this again, and that drones would be a big part of the conflict, and she got it right on both counts, you know. So very interesting and thought-provoking. I hope you thought it was interesting. Thanks very much for watching. I probably won't be wearing I won't handle the diary again probably next time, so I probably won't have the gloves on next time. But thanks a lot. I hope you thought this was worthy of your time. And when you see her talk about the impact of what what the First World War did to her family, and a relatively lucky escape they had, or we had, because my life would never have existed had this not ended well for us. So it's quite hard to get your head around, really. Quite humbling. Thank you very much for watching anyway. I hope to see you again. I hope you come back for a few more tasters of this stuff. And if there's any questions you've got or anything you want to see a bit more of, please just say, and I'll endeavour to incorporate it next time. Until I'm back on to talk more about the Great War and some of these amazing men and how they coped with this terrible situation they were in. Till next time, thank you very much for joining me. Take care of yourselves, and I hope to see you again in the next one. Till then, thanks a lot. Don't forget your poppy. Take care, and bye for now.